Hello, this is Liz. Here on another um what's today? Tuesday. Wow. Here on another Tuesday for film recommendations. Today's Tuesday, meaning it is a Netflix day, and we're gonna look and see what's on there. We're gonna start with a very beloved romantic drama with Sleepless in Seattle. I actually first knew this movie based on the soundtrack. My mother was obsessed with it and it would play in the car. So I actually knew the music from it way before I actually saw the movie. But everyone knows this movie. Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, just two people meeting. I, of course, always think of this line from The Critic where they just say it was just a ripoff of and A Fair to Remember, which wasn't a good movie in the first place, which is not true, but it's kind of just always edged in my brain. But it is still a very nice and very likable movie. Moving on to something modern is The Incredible Jessica James. So this was directed by Jessica Williams, who you might know from her podcast Two Dope Queens, or if you watched The Daily Show, she was on that for a long time. In fact, when Jon Stewart retired, there was some talk or a lot of people hoping that she would take over. That was not the case, but she went on and wrote and directed this. Actually, I don't know if she directed it, but she definitely wrote this film, and it's kind of, I would say, it's akin to Frances Ha, where it is coming of age woman in her 20s, but it is far more about her personal fulfillment or overall fulfillment than just romantic fulfillment. Chris O'Dowd is in this as well. Also, I think Lakeith Stanfield is in it, but mainly Chris O'Dowd is who I remember, who you probably know from movies like Bridesmaids. But Jessica Williams is really good in this, and I like that this movie kind of ends with her sort of kind of finding some professional fulfillment as well. It's a very sweet little film if you like coming of age movies that aren't all about the romance. Going on to some summer movies, the first we have is Air Force One. I mean, we associate Harrison Ford with a lot of, I guess I would say, summer movies. Of course, we have Indiana Jones. We have Star Wars, which May kind of counts as summer movie season. But Air Force One is just, it's 100% grade A American cheese, and I absolutely love it. It's one of those movies where I'm like, this movie's ridiculous, but I mean, sometimes you need movies like that. Independence Day is ridiculous, and I absolutely love Independence Day. And I find Air Force One to be kind of in the same vein. And it's also the last. It's kind of the last time Harrison Ford was really a believable action guy. No disrespect to the man, he is an American treasure. He will always be Han Solo and Indiana Jones, but man, him in the Crystal Skull is just like you can't do that anymore, Harrison. I mean, I have my critiques of the new Star Wars movies, but I think Force Awakens knew they're like, yeah, he can't do what he used to do. Okay, I digress. Going back to the 80s for another kind of summer fun movie is The Karate Kid, which, we all remember Wax On, Wax Off. And what's interesting with this movie, it is mostly remembered as being a fairly light, film, the underdog kid versus the Cobra Kai, but you actually have Pat Morita giving a really good nuanced performance. And fun fact, he was actually nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in for 1984. And he has this monologue in the film where he's just talking about losing his wife and child in the war. And it's one of those like, wow, I did not remember this when I saw it as a kid. So I would actually say revisit The Karate Kid. It is also chock full of good 80s music that I love. And yeah, I think there's a little bit more meat on the bones, as it were. So from Karate Kid, we're actually going to Kung Fu, and one of my favorite movies of the aughts, Kung Fu Hustle. If you're familiar with Stephen Chow, he is a Chinese action guy, definitely from like the Hong Kong school. And Kung Fu Hustle hit America. A lot of us had not seen something like that. It was basically Kung Fu action meets Looney Tunes style humor. It is, I remembered actually, again, going to college in New York, actually had the opportunity to see these movies, so I could just hop on the ferry and go to Manhattan. And I told one of my classmates I was going to see it, and they're like, "Yeah, that didn't look like a real movie." So Um, it's I recommend it because much like movies, Stephen Chow's other films, Shaolin Soccer, I think people have a very narrow view of what action films coming from China, be it Hong Kong, Taiwan, or mainland, as the very either the old Shaw Brothers stuff or the Jackie Chan stuff, and it has actually really evolved as an art form over there. So watch Kung Fu Hustle, you are going to have a good time. Ooh, next movie. You might not have a good time, but it's still a good movie, and that is Clint Eastwood's Million Dollar Baby, or as I like to call it, Clint Eastwood's last good movie or great movie. Gran Torino's fine, but I don't think Clint Eastwood's output in the past. I think since Gran Torino has been that great, but I really like Million Dollar Baby. It's a very interesting kind of father-daughter story. If you don't know, it's a Clint Eastwood is a guy, owns a boxing ring, agrees to take on and mentor this girl who wants to be a boxer, and they end up bonding, and then tragedy strikes. She ends up being paralyzed, and that is where the third act drama starts. I think it's an incredibly moving film as well. Clint Eastwood's great in it, Morgan Freeman's great in it, Hilary Swank is phenomenal, and it's able to play these dramatic points without being extremely cloying or manipulative. I think it is a really good movie, and I kind of wish Clint Eastwood could still make movies like that. Next movie, definitely I would say still kind of a downer, but we're going back to China with Ang Lee's Lust Caution. Ang Lee's, I think, American output is hit or miss because he'll make, I think, great films like Brokeback Mountain, or he'll do stuff like Life of Pi and Sense and Sensibility. Then he'll do stuff like Gemini Man, where I just kind of wonder what's going on. But Ang Lee's Chinese language output is, I think, consistently really good. And Lust Caution, I think, is a fantastic film. It's a kind of a spy thriller, it's a political thriller. It takes place during the Japanese occupation of China. It's a bit of a long film, but if you are a history buff, I would definitely say watch this movie. I really, really like it. I do believe, I guess I should say kind of a content warning. I think it was initially really definitely a hard R. I think the first cut in the US actually was NC-17. It can get pretty explicit, but beyond that, I would say, a very good and intriguing film. So the last two movies are more, or not movies, recommendations are more TV based. So the first is The Last Dance, and that is about Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls. So when I was growing up, I was never a big sports kid, but Michael Jordan was one of the few athletes I actually knew who he was. And because my dad was originally from Chicago, there was kind of a, we're rooting for the Bulls in this house. Although, kind of finding out Michael Jordan, my dad was like, Michael Jordan's doesn't have the reputation of being the nicest guy in Chicago, but I think the consensus was not the nicest guy, but the man can play basketball, and we're paying him to play basketball. But this is about that season. It's actually Michael Jordan being a little bit more candid and kind of addressing some of that stuff. And for me, again, I'm not much of a sports person, but if there is an interesting narrative and an interesting hook, I will watch it. And The Last Dance definitely had an interesting narrative slash hook. So definitely watch it. If you like the ESPN 30 for 30 stuff, this is definitely up your alley. And the final one is, it's an episode of, I think, a show, but I just saw, I'm like, oh, it's 45 minutes, I'll watch it. It's called The Mitfords, A Tale of Two Sisters. So I am obsessed with the Mitford sisters. They are a British, like, high society family. There were six girls, and I think all but one of them had fairly impactful lives. And they all went in very different directions. The one sister who didn't have a very public life just decided, I'm going to go raise chickens. Whereas you had another become like, one of them, Unity, actually went to go be a Nazi in Germany. And that actually kind of leads to what this documentary is about. So it focuses on two of the sisters, Diana and Jessica, and how they were only a few years apart and were actually fairly close growing up. And then World War II and their growing political opinions and identities caused them to just a rift that they never recovered from. So Jessica Mitford might sound familiar because she lived most of her adult life in the US and wrote a fairly well known book about the funeral industry called The American Way of Death. Fairly active in the American Communist Party. I think she eloped with her first husband to go fight in the Spanish Civil War against Franco. And then meanwhile, you have Diane, who went full on into fascism and a Hitler supporter and was actually jailed at some point in Britain. I think it is a fascinating look at just one period of time in this incredibly interesting family. And I think every single sister in that family is interesting in some way. So if you're into kind of not quite royal family drama, but British high society drama, The Mitfords: A Tale of Two Sisters is up your alley, and hopefully that'll inspire you to read a bit more about them because, again, they are fascinating. Alrighty, that is all for today. I will see you tomorrow at the library. Have a good day.